west for the site. That's the search ring. As soon as we move that search ring, you're absolutely becoming less optimal from a traffic capacity perspective, which is separate from coverage. So from a coverage, a pure number of bars on your phone, yes, the answer is yes. But from an efficiency and capacity in a whole host of other aspects that are just as important as coverage, the answer is no. That it's most efficient within that ring.
Jim, would you mind defining capacity? I think it's something that we all need to understand as far as being able to make the connection.
Hold on real quick, to that question though. What is the difference between that tower and the two towers that are northwest that have very little coverage? The proposed tower versus those two towers that right next to each other give less coverage than this one.
The term cellular, right? The reason that we call it cellular is because it's an analogy for just like cellular in your body, right? You have cell splitting. So over time, as the capacity and the traffic goes up and up, you remove the tall tower and you replace it with two small ones. Or you remove two small ones and you just keep dividing the sites over time. That's how it works. Because we don't have unlimited amounts of spectrum, we have a finite amount of spectrum. That's tying back into the capacity question. Because we only have so much spectrum, we have to reuse it. That's why we have multiple cell sites, not just one great big tower to cover everything like a
On average, how long does that
station.
take before you have to split?
Sorry?
On average, how long does that take before you have to split from one tower to two towers?
It's going to be a function of the population growth and market share.
But do you have an idea?
It's different literally everywhere. Right now, I can tell you that we need the one. So.
But 10 years from now, we could be in here talking about we need two.
Yes.
Which could be just on the other side of town.
That's entirely possible.
Norma?
If the cell phone tower was to go up right there, are property taxes gonna go higher because of that? Or are they gonna stay the same, or what? Is it gonna affect our property? Is it gonna?
I think we dropped the value.
Does that have anything to do with our property taxes?
That really is, that has nothing to do with this permit right now. Yes, sir.
To answer her question, yes, it actually, your value of your home is depreciated from 20 to 30% by being within X amount of feet of a cell phone tower. It's written document, written proof.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Obviously, the PowerPoint presented all the benefits of it, and all those benefits seem to be tied to somebody that was with AT&T. Since this affects the city as a whole, all of us that are not AT&T customers, what's the benefit to us?
Yeah, answer that. This tower, and thank you for the question. This tower is designed for co-location, which means as other carriers experience the need, then instead of having to, because of the height of this tower, instead of having to come and build another tower, they can come and co-locate their antennas on it. That is the benefit to cut down on proliferation.
Thank you. Can I ask a question to that?
Please.
In the beginning of your proposal, your first statement was the reason you needed this tower is because the other carriers use a different technology.
No,
so how would that
I didn't
work?
say that.
Because we talked about, the first part was talking about, well, we have the other towers and they're located over here, but they use different than what AT&T does, which is the necessity for this tower.
I think Vince may have addressed that.
Fair enough. I apologize
No,
if I misrepresented
absolutely.
you.
It's been a long evening.
I was discussing that each one is competitive with each other. They have their own system, their own networks, they have their own needs. We talked about Verizon on that ATC tower out there on County Road 226 has their own system.
Agreed.
AT&T is different. They want to get in the city and cover the community area. So it's just completely apples to oranges.
Well, and I respect that. So I continue to question that with their technology, maybe we should possibly look at that, because I have 5 bars of Verizon, and that doesn't bother my house at all.
Well, what is the law concerning that, Dan, about, so what, we have one carrier here and another carrier can't be kept out because...
Sprint works perfect.
Right. That's what the law states. So unfortunately, that's not an argument.
No, it's not an argument, but it's a question of the technology, saying that it has to be in town but it doesn't be because I have absolute full coverage on a tower that is not located in town. So that was all my part of that statement. Thank you.
Just to rebuttal to what Tommy's talking about, is in the zoning and planning, they mentioned that they cannot coexist or cannot be on the same tower as Sprint. Is that what was said?
No.
Verizon?
No.
Y'all said y'all did not want to go outside the city limits where everybody's got Sprint service.
No,
and wonderful
excuse me
service.
1 second. What you're talking about is the search ring. What Vince was pointing out is
No, I'm not talking about search.
the location, well, they cannot be on the Verizon tower.
Why not?
Because it's outside the search ring. It's 1 point something miles outside the search ring. It will not accomplish, excuse me 1 second, I know you want to jump in, give me 1 second. To accomplish the coverage objectives that you need, that we've shown, it has to be placed within the search ring. So to go out, and that's only about a quarter-mile search ring. That's how fine out it is. So to go out 1.9 miles, Vince, is that about what it is, to the Verizon tower, has nothing to do with the Verizon equipment. What it does is what the FCC has said in their declaratory ruling. It cannot, and quote them, materially inhibit their ability. AT&T has to have the ability to provide this type of service, not only for calls, which are the less of the data hogs, if you were, but all of us tonight have used our phone, checking emails, voicemails, so forth, and data. So it has nothing to do, Mr. James, on not being able to be placed on a Verizon equipment.
Okay, but your AT&T's RF engineer sat right in this room a week ago Wednesday and said if that ring was relocated quarter-mile, he would find optimal service. That's his job.
You can jump in,
That was Mike Wade, he's on my team,
Yes,
working with me.
But he said
So
that more than once.
what he's saying is, you've got the two sort of components that I was touching on earlier. There's the coverage component, and there's a capacity and demand component, right? So those are not the same thing. So you try to get the site as close to the demand as possible. And that gives you the efficiency that I was speaking about earlier. Now, I can move the ring over here. From a coverage perspective, it'd be pretty similar. But from a capacity and efficiency perspective, it wouldn't be. So when we look at all of the data, that's what drove us to draw that triangular shape that it is, right? So it's more than just coverage of bars on your phone. It's other.
It gets bogged up if there's
Okay.
not enough.
To reiterate on you.
people are on it. It gets bogged up.
That's right.
Excuse me, yes, you have a question?
So if this doesn't pass and y'all can't build right there, y'all are gonna move y'all's ring somewhere else anyways, right? And find a new circle for y'all to put the tower in, right?
Well, what we'll do is we'll do.
Yes or no?
We will see if we can. It'll get stack ranked against everything. So I don't have unlimited money. So if it comes stack ranked.
So that's a yes, if we'll get, your ring will get moved.
But
This is not gonna pass right there.
Okay.
It's going to be delayed.
Okay.
It could be
I don't care
delayed
if it gets delayed.
I would like to ask now if the council could please just have some time to ask questions and come to working on this. So council people, you have some questions here?
I do. I did some research on the internet myself. Typical cell tower range is 22 to 45 miles. It's all over the internet.
It's incredibly wrong. They're like super wrong.
So what's the typical range?
It's going to be a function of the height. So what you're
Well, the
looking at is the
250
taller
foot
you are,
tower.
the
The
further you go.
250 foot
So
tower.
about, I would say, close to 3 miles. You know, maybe 4 if you're really pushing. You know.
Most of our rings that we drive when we're doing
That's
sites for
coverage.
every carrier is about 1.2, 1.4, but I built them a third of a mile apart from each other in land just because of the amount of capacity that's needed.
Councilman, this map is probably what Jim's referring to. This is the improvement, is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Are you
So-
referring?
I'm sorry. And that's not 22 miles, as you can see in the other.
You're showing me optimal,
Or
prime. The red is prime, that's the best.
Yes, sir.
So 5 bars, within
That's
a
right.
3 mile
Within
radius.
Bolton.
So orange.
You're probably, I mean, again, can you go 6-7 miles from the site and get service? You can, but it's not good at all. You certainly can't do 22, I think you said 22 miles. Not with, unless maybe you're at 500 feet and it's perfectly flat terrain and the stars are aligned, everything works perfect. Maybe you can get that far, but that's highly unlikely.
So if the tower was north, south, east, or west of town by a mile or two, you would still be able to cover the city with.
There's coverage and then there's capacity, right? So it's two things.
It's an umbrella. If we just stuck an umbrella, covered.
If it was just coverage, then yeah, no problem, right? When we were talking earlier about voice versus data, when it was just voice, that was the crux of it, was coverage, right? Because it's a very small amount of connection demand for voice. So you can serve towns from outside, no problem. But as the demand for data volume goes up and up and up, we need sites to be closer to where the users are.
Very quickly, as far as capacity, Councilman, thanks for asking the question. Capacity, like the way I like to think about it, is a water hose. There's only so much water you can pump through the hose. Or it rusts at the connection, or that's the most. So when everybody in here, and when you now have almost 90% of all U.S. adults having smartphones versus just cell phones, we're addicted to the data. And so when he says you can have coverage, you might be able to make the call, but you're not going to be able, like I was stuck today when I got here trying to download emails. So that's the capacity issue, and it's tied to, again, the statistics why I'm sure you have a smartphone and not just a flip phone, maybe a Motorola. You need it for your business. You need to be able to see emails. And when all of us are doing it all at one time, 5 o'clock in the evening, school time with the kids, grandkids doing it, that's the water that's constricted going through the hose. That's why these systems are designed to be able to expand capacity. Thanks for the question.
I was wondering, what other structures will be on the site?
Scott, you want to talk about this? The only structures that will be on the site are the equipment rack. It's going to be a rack.
As far as structures, you got the tower, you got the fence, you got that, obviously that H-frame. The carrier equipment's either, sometimes, most of the carriers have gone away from putting shelters in, unless the federal government comes in and they want to put something on the tower. They tend to still like shelters, small cabinets, but for the most part, it's just cabinets.
There's no generator or?
There will probably be generators on it, but most of the designs now are where they've got 8-hour backup for battery, and then the generators kick on only when that 8 hours has been depleted. So a lot of that is, 911 service requires when the power goes out here, if a hurricane comes through or whatever, and power goes out, they still have to, those networks still have to stay up. So, if the power's been out for 8 hours and you hear the whir going, it's probably the generator cranks those things back up.
Why does the tower have to be so tall? Could it be less than 250 feet?
Jim, you want to address that to reach the optimum capacity that you need to be able to accomplish, like the FCC says, your objective?
So the tower height is, all that's coming to mind is very complicated stuff. So I'm trying to come up with analogies over slide. But basically, you've got a halving distance between the sites that exist and the site that we're building, right? And since from the middle of town to either one of those sites is about 6 miles in either direction, so 12 miles site to site. We put our site in the middle and we do a calculation based on how tall it is, the antenna's vertical beam width, and our coverage objective, right? So it's just a triangle. It's like a trig, right? So the higher it gets, the more length of coverage you get, right? and then that shrinks as it comes down. Does that make sense?
So it seems like from listening tonight, your circle is rigid. You can't
To reach
We
this.
would have to
For capacity.
reanalyze everything.
reanalyze.
and
So
start
we
over.
go back and starting
Yeah,
over.
For capacity.
that's right.
Can I ask a question? What about the change of zoning possibility? I was thinking that when you were talking about the 11 sites and how you got rid of each site or decided, pared it down to the one you landed on, that the tower would not be allowed on residential at all. But if you change the zone, which we have the authority to do, would that be a possible site?
We could, we looked at a lot of those tracks and we realized we were just gonna be adjacent to residential almost all the way throughout that range. But, I mean, it would be again, like Jim's saying, starting over.
If it's within the circle,
If it's within the circle, we'd still have to start over on the track. In other words, we have to do all the regulatory, all the environmental, lease agreement, everything, survey, everything starts over.
Mayor, on this slide, I'm sorry. On this slide, the red indicates the residential districts.
right?
So to go through, and we can't speak for your process, what neighbors would if we, I'm just pulling this out, if, let's say that tract. And then you got a question, and I'll leave it up to Dan, spot zoning. And there's so many different issues that come up. Are we going to run into the same situation, Dan, I'd have to leave that to y'all advising the city on rezoning a portion of the red, which will abut residential?
Well, everything abuts residential here.
Well, that's what I said.
I'm sorry.
He can't speak for the other residents, but I think there's enough here speaking for this. I don't understand that statement.
Well, I'm sorry, let me maybe restate it.
I don't know what you're saying.
Number one, you know what spot zoning is?
I absolutely don't.
Okay, that was a hurdle I'm sure your city attorney will address, extremely excellent law firm. That's the first hurdle I see. Second is, no matter where you put it on residential, that's why Vince and the team, why aren't these residents going to be as upset as you are if it's placed there? So that's the problem with the residential, and that's why, under your code as written, it's a permitted use with an SUP.
But there's other residents that may not do that, that are in this circle.
But I'm sorry that we can't answer, that's very speculative.
But
Thank you though for
that's
asking.
her question, which was my question, but she didn't see me with my hand raised.
Okay, pardon.
But if there's a 1% chance that this could be down the line a medical issue for our citizens of Poth City Council, isn't it worth starting over to possibly help our community be safe and away from health dangers?
There was a hand up over here, yes, ma'am.
I just had a quick question as far as the health as a mom. My daughter walks right past the tower, 100 yards. Is that going to be a health concern? Or if it does cause the, I mean, I don't know, I'm just asking, as a mom, she has to walk right past it every single day and then have to stand out there. And if it's raining and if there is all this other stuff, are they going to be inhaling it? I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Problem is that we don't know the
Right,
answer.
I know.
Right.
I just,
Holly, just a second.
I mean, it's just kind of mind-boggling that you have this car wash, you call it that, there where you have public, and you're gonna have, I mean, I live right there. There's little kids running around while mom and dad are washing the car. And they're gonna be running all in that area, and I guess it's gonna be fenced, I don't know,
Yes.
but, I mean.
There'll be a privacy
the vulture
board
poop
on
is
board
not gonna be
fence.
within the parameter of the fence line, so
I'm
you're
sorry.
gonna poop or throw up or whatever you call it. The vomit is not gonna be within the parameter of the fence, so it's gonna be all over this place where you have a car wash. And again, there's kids playing on the fences, they're doing stuff, they're yelling and screaming, and you're gonna have that? I don't get it. I truly don't.
I have a question.
Yes.
What about a fire? What is y'all's precaution to get to a fire? It's in the tower. question being, you have to drive through a stall in a car wash, pass a covered vacuum cleaner station to get to the tower. So how is our volunteer fire department supposed to go through that maze? By the time they get to the actual site, we're gonna be burned up in the area.
Yeah, actually, just to answer that one question, there is a lane, there is an easement from the fence to the building.
That's correct.
That is without any cover, that is wide enough for the truck to enter.
And that will be reviewed by your engineer and has initially been reviewed by the city engineer.
It has already been?
Yes,
reviewed?
that's why we received the building permit. We received the building permit. And,
wrong
Erroneously.
residential permit.
The problem-
I wouldn't go there.
It was reviewed by the engineers.
It was, yes.
During zoning and planning, I know that the zoning and planning committee passed this on to y'all in favor of. Your city attorney stood right there and actually told them in layman's terms, regardless how you vote tonight, if you all vote it down, it will be passed to the council on Monday. So it took them 2 sessions, one of 7 minutes and one of 6 minutes to even put a motion into play to pass it. Nobody in the zoning and planning wanted it, but their hands were tied because they told them, no, regardless how they voted for it, their vote didn't count.
Okay, yes.
There gonna be lights, assuming on the tower?
Scott, you want to address?
FAA requires any structure under 99 feet to be lit.
Say that again.
So, louder, Scott.
FAA requires any structure over 199 feet is to be lit. This one will have a top light and a side.
How many?
A top light and a side.
So just 2? Vibrations now?
How far can those lights be seen? I mean, how bright are they gonna be? Because our houses are right underneath them. I mean, am I gonna be sitting in my backyard and have a red flashing light every single night in my backyard?
They have to be lit all night. Well, they'll be flashing.
So that's what I'm saying, how far are they gonna,
We can't estimate that.
how can y'all, I mean, y'all have to have so much visibility for planes to see them, so how much visibility for a plane do you have to have for them to see it? There has to be.
The FAA approves it and it has to go through the process, so we don't
Okay,
have.
how many lumens is the light?
Okay.
I'm sorry, we don't have that answer for you, thank you though.
Y'all don't know how many lumens y'all's light bulbs are that y'all put up?
It's different on different towers.
Y'all have to know how many lumens.
Any vibrations, typical noises from the equipment on the tower?
The equipment at the top of the tower?
The
Or
generators.
any equipment,
The generator when it goes off.
other than the
Right.
generator?
No, they're electronic
No, I mean,
equipment
the
racks.
lights are LED. The lights are LED. We use the LED pads.
Does this thing have a backup generator when our power goes out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
What is the amount that one of these sways? I mean, a house moves, an attic moves, the Tower Americas moves.
Oh, the tower?
It does.
We don't,
I work on elevators there, so I
we
know.
don't have that calculation,
Yeah,
I'm
but I'll tell
sorry.
you, it does, it also depends on what's, so it's engineered for basically, layman's terms, 4 billboards, 100 square feet in each rad.
Right.
So if you've got, and for basically 6,000 pounds each, so it's like 4 Chevrolets that can go up there. If you've only got AT&T at the top of it, you still have an obscene amount of capacity that it's not even gonna come close to you, even in a hurricane account. They're designed for this particular area, I think up to 136 mile an hour sustained winds at full capacity loading.
So the one trip a month.
They don't even want to come out once a month.
I get it, but
right?
once they stack it up and fill it up with others, then it's more trips. They could.
Theoretically, could be.
Okay.
It's kind of false.
I would like for our attorney to address some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 second, man, I gotta shut it off. There you go. Your phone don't work, right? You keep getting it.
So I first want to address some comments that have been made about the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And just to make sure that everyone here understands what the role of Planning and Zoning Commission is. Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body only. So the comment was made that this is going on to the council because it has to go on to the council. Planning and Zoning Commission does not have the authority to stop a process. It goes forward with a recommendation, and that's what was stated to, and we have a commissioner here, that it's either going to go forward with a recommendation of approval or a recommendation of denial or a recommendation of approval with conditions. So there was 3 options that they were explained they had. But it must go forward. It doesn't stop there. So that's the first thing I want to clarify. The second thing that's been stated that is not, and I don't agree with 100%, is this continued statement that this is a permitted use. It's not a permitted use. It's a permitted use with a special use permit. So it requires additional steps. When a zoning ordinance is put in place, there are those things allowed by right, because whoever put together that ordinance has decided that this is compatible within this zoning district. Now, if they put an asterisk beside it and say it requires a special use permit, it's because it's a use of a nature that typically requires secondary review. You want someone to look at it closer. So, because this is a special use permit, the council does have additional authority, more authority than it would have than an up and down vote on whether or not it's just the zoning is appropriate or inappropriate. It's whether or not that use is compatible with the surrounding area, the surrounding uses, established uses, surrounding zoning districts. So it's allowed in GB with a special use permit. So what are the things you can look at? Well, your authority, and I've given each of you a sheet that details what your authority is. What can you require of the applicant? If you're not convinced, if you've had questions raised tonight by your residents, or you're not convinced with the answers you've received, you can require additional plans, additional information on specific things, additional operating data, additional evaluation concerning the location, functions, and characteristics of anything being built there under that permit. You can also establish conditions related to the operation, location, arrangement, or construction that's going to take place on that site through the permit process. You can also impose development standards and safeguards that will protect adjacent properties as you deem necessary or appropriate. And there's a whole list, and I think it was Warren or Jesse that read through those. They read through those from your ordinance. They include the excessive noise, vibration, dust, things such as that. So the question is twofold. It's whether or not it's compatible as the application is before you. Can it be made compatible with any of these additional things, any additional conditions, whether it's fencing, landscaping, something to deter turkey vultures or anything such as that. Or it is a determination by this council after discussion and deliberation on the factors that are in front of you that, you know what, we can't make this compatible. There's no conditions that can be placed within here that can make this compatible. I understand Optimum, and I understand that they're trying to get it in one tower, but we also know from their own testimony and their own diagrams that they can use 2 towers to get the same coverage if they spread them apart further. But I mean, that's a question that is certainly can be asked by the council. But the bottom line is it's about compatibility. Just quickly though, there were 2 things that you can't base this on, and I know I've discussed this with P&Z as well. I mean, the effects on health, it's not that this council doesn't care, okay? It's not that the P&Z doesn't care. It's that the federal government has said they cannot use that as a factor when they're making a decision, whether or not there's any impacts on the health of individuals. If there's any effects by the emissions from the tower on the radiation emissions. They're prohibited by law from considering that. And the other factor is, as already stated, the fact that Verizon has good coverage. You can't discriminate among carriers or deny them the opportunity to cover similar territory. So just because one provider has coverage doesn't mean, well, nobody else has to be in here because this provider has adequate coverage. So Council, I've given you a worksheet that has the provisions of your ordinance within it. If there are legal questions that you need me to answer that you don't want answered in a public setting, you can always go back into closed session if you have additional questions after hearing the presentations that you have. Other than that, I can answer. If not, I can answer questions here from you.
I have a copy.
I have articles, I have like
Questions on, I guess, the wording.
Also, Mayor, if I could, it does require a 4/5 vote. 3/4 is what the statute says. The way that plays out with the general law city is it's 4 out of the 5 council members, because the mayor would not vote unless there's an event, except the event of a tie. That is just for approval. So it requires 4 out of 5 to approve. It requires a simple majority on a denial. I would remind the council that the Federal Telecommunications Act requires us to have, written findings to the greatest extent possible, based upon substantial evidence that you have in front of you, if there is going to be a denial. So, to the 200-foot radius, that's statutory. I've heard people talk about increasing that. That's in the local government code. That's not just a local rule or regulation. The Chapter 211 of the local government code establishes that radius as 200 foot because our legislature has determined that you have a special interest if you live within 200 feet, even if the tower's taller. But that's not the council's rule, and we can't be more restricted than state law on that.
I have a question real quick. So we can't approve or disapprove because of Verizon gets good service.
That's correct.
And we can't approve or disapprove because of possible medical conditions.
Just related to the radiation.
The radiation from the tower.
I can't speak to medical conditions related to.
Well, yeah, I understand.
But those
Okay.
are not stated in the federal code.
But how are we supposed to approve or disapprove for something that might happen? Okay, I understand the buzzards and the turkey vultures. How do we know they're gonna choose that tower to go land? I mean, I live less than 100 yards from where they roost right now. You do too. All I'm saying is, how can we say, no, we don't want the tower because of turkey vultures? And I understand, y'all, this is a tough decision for every single person in this room, okay? But the what ifs to deny it are, they're not making sense.
Sure, and the only thing I would say in response to that is that, I mean, it's a policy decision. It's your decision. And you all know whether or not you've heard enough evidence to make up your mind one way or the other. But it's not always black or white, right? So that's why, just like the P&Z, you can approve, you can deny, or you can approve with conditions. If there's concerns that can be addressed through conditions, you can attach conditions to your approval, and they will be included in the permit. For example, if you want a masonry wall instead of a wooden fence, if you want some deterrent for turkey vultures, if you want, and whatever the case may be, you have that authority so long as it's within that list that I gave you that's allowable with special use permit, because that's all about increasing compatibility.
To me, the problem with it is this part where it says, no use shall otherwise be permitted, which is, or would reasonably be detrimental to the neighborhood residents, or which would interfere with the reasonable use and enjoyment of their property by reason of the emission of dust, smoke, odor, glare. I mean, I get all those words, but I keep going back to the reasonable use and enjoyment of their property because they live there. And the eyesore is a big part of it, but it is, to me, that rope exhibit tonight of how close everything is, that has been one of those things I've gone and looked at and looked at and looked at, and it's just, that was an effective visual for me, because, or any condition which would amount to a public nuisance. Some would argue that the tower being there could be a public nuisance. So that's my feeling about this. But
Can I ask a question? When you originally opened it up, you said it was approved by planning and zoning with provisions. What was the provision suggested?
the fire lane,
The fire lane?
yes.
I have one more question, and I'll listen and thank you very much for some of your clarification, but we're sitting here petitioning for use for specific use permit, and there was a lot of conditions that you brought up, so why was so much work done before we even got to this point?
That's right.
Well, there's a massive amount of work there, the footings and the stuff.
It was, the permit was erroneously permitted.
Okay.
The asterisk was missed.
Yes, ma'am. That's all the answer, Andy?
And so we began this process like that never happened.
Yes, ma'am.
That's how we're having to deal with this, like that wasn't even there. Okay.
I have a question. How can there be two businesses on one lot?
There's no prohibition in your zoning ordinance about multiple commercial
You
uses.
can't
on the
have
same
two
property.
houses on one lot.
It's different with the commercial. It's a it's the general business ordinance. Okay? Are we ready to move along? Any more questions? Pardon?
Madam President, Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we deny this application due to the undesirable hazardous condition, the odors, debris, feces of the buzzards, and the offensive view that could happen.
I'd like to second that and add in there based on Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 2.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of denying the permit? Okay, that's all. Fine. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
I've got you. Really? I'm totally gonna put that one in the paper.
At least let us look like we're doing something like
Right.
You hold it down, we're still.
Y'all, we still have a meeting to do, so if you want to take your business outside, we appreciate it, or stay and listen, but you need to mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's fine.